Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our second TA call for the month of May. And as I'm sure you know, if you're on the call, that we will be focusing on the State Personnel Development Grant today. Jennifer Coffey from our Research to Practice Division will be leading us through that. But I have a couple of short announcements, and I promised Jennifer I would be short because she said they have a lot of content today. First of all, I want to thank you for your timely submissions of your IDEA grant application for Part B and Part C, especially with the late addition of the new GEPA Section 427 form. Our staff are busily reviewing your submissions. We'll get back to you if there are any questions, but we will reconcile any issues quickly as possible to make sure that everybody gets their funds by July 1st. We are also busily preparing to issue our SPP APR determinations in June. The next National TA call on June 8th will be focused on determinations. During the second June TA call, which is June 22nd, we'll have presenters from the Office of Educational Technology present on some exciting opportunities to get involved in the national digital equity effort. A third item here is you should have received the 2023 Grantee Satisfaction Survey that the department sends out every year. It would have come from the CFI group on behalf of the U.S. Department of Education. And the subject line would read, Department of Education Grantee Satisfaction Survey 2023. I know that sometimes things like this end up in your junk or your spam folder, or you may have seen it but not recognized what it was. So if you haven't already seen it, please check. If you've seen it, not yet responded, we really want to urge you to do that. The survey deadline is June 2nd, and we really do use your feedback to tell us what we're doing right, as well as areas where we could improve. One last mention, we have two new staff members who joined MSIP. Becca Smith, formerly of Research to Practice, will be our data analyst. This is a brand new position to our division. And Sharon Loza has been hired as our data implementation team facilitator. So please help us welcome these new staff members to the MSIP team. Without further ado, I want to introduce our OSEP director, Valerie Williams, who will kick off today's main event. Valerie?
Thank you, Greg. Greatly appreciate it. And just like that, Jennifer, appreciate that, bringing up the slides. So Greg already set the stage. We're going to be talking about the SPDIG today, State Personnel Development Grants Program. I want to thank everyone who's on here today because the SPDIGs are extremely important, and a lot of people don't exactly know what they are, what they can be used for, how critical it could be to your work. So we thought it was worth it to spend a moment walking through this. We're going to go over what you see before you, which is the SPDIG in a nutshell, everything that you need to know, how it can be used, how some states are using it, specifically going to highlight Minnesota and Kansas. It is one thing to have a cerebral discussion about the SPDIG and the meaning and how we came up with it. It is a whole nother conversation to talk to two people in states that are using it, what they're using it for, and how it has been successful. So we wanted to absolutely share that with you. All the supports that we have available, possible challenges, and how to help you plan for it in the future, because this is one of the few funding sources where it can only go to states for this specific reason, and that's it, right? This can't go to institutions of higher education or nonprofits. It can't go to anyone else but you, the states, to help you with your work. So we're going to walk through a couple things. So next slide, please, Jennifer. My question to you, this is the magic wand question I have been asking literally since I walked in the door in various capacities with various audiences. If you had unlimited resources, that being people, money, and time, what is the one thing you would focus on? And if you could drop that in the chat, because something might come to you and someone else on the line might look at that and say, I would love to do that as well, but I never considered that to be a possibility, right? Because we frequently think about what we can't do, or we think about the limitations of the funding that we do have and try to prioritize. But if you didn't have to worry about that, what is the one thing that you would work on? What do you want to devote more focus and more attention to, that you haven't been able to up until now for whatever reason? So do me a favor and drop that in the chat. Engagement of families. That's very interesting because I spoke to a state earlier this week, and the state leadership, not even special education, but the state leadership wants to create a full-time position for family engagement. So that's a very interesting answer. Oh, I like these. Very nice. And so as you're coming up with your answers and you're dropping it in the chat, Jennifer is going to walk through how it is that a SPDIG could help you do some of this. I talked to a state today. They are using their SPDIG money for transition. And they are very excited about that. It was something that they already kind of had going, but they needed some more resources toward it. And they're very excited about that. And so keep in mind the answers that you are dropping in the chat. First, take a look at what your peers are dropping in, because it could be something that might really resonate with you. But then also think about, as Jennifer is going through the information, how you might possibly be able to use the SPDIG for these efforts. And so I'm going to step out of the way because there's a ton of information. And Jennifer, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you so much, Valerie. It's really nice to have you on, and thank you, Greg, for kicking us off. So our magic wand question, I did not see any responses so far, any ideas in the chat that cannot be done with a SPDIG. And I know Carrie and Tom are shaking their heads because they're agreeing. So it's all possible. I know there are things that sometimes stand in the way, and we're going to have a chance to talk about that later in the small group breakouts. So thank you for taking a minute to think and to share. So we get to go through a menu today. This makes it look much more exciting than when you see it in the PDF notice that comes out from the Federal Register. So I'm hoping to make it a little bit more real, practical, interactive. But what you should know about the notice, it's based on IDEA. It doesn't change all that much year to year, right? Because it's IDEA. We might have a committed preference priority added to it, but you'd know that beforehand because we'd send it out for your review. So basically, there's a section A that is about professional development, quite broad. Almost at least 90% of your funds would be used for something related to that section. And then you have to choose something from section B, which is more of a systemic focus, and that could be up to 10% of your funds. All right. There are so many options for how to use this money, and I just wanted to give you some flavor or get you thinking about some things that are needed in your state. So when you see teacher here, put in place personnel. So this could be related service providers, or providers, however you want to think about it. But for providers, you can support mentoring, you can support teaming, you can support reduced schedules and caseloads. You can use it to integrate technology into the work and the early childhood programs or the school programs in the district. You can think about instruction and training on how to use data to improve instruction, how to better communicate with families, how to enhance children's learning, collaboration, consultative models, thinking about challenging academic achievement standards and what that means for IEPs and other work. You can improve knowledge of special ed and regular ed teachers and principals and paraprofessionals as appropriate in effective instructional practices. That could be for limited English proficient students. Some of this language is a little bit old because IDEA is old. Involve collaborative groups of teachers and administrators. You can see on the right, PBIS, scientifically based reading instruction, early and appropriate interventions, children with low incidence disabilities, successful transitioning to post-secondary opportunities. Think our 3E, right? Engage, empower, expect in some order. Classroom-based techniques prior to referral. And then we have involving parents in their child's education, including parents with low income and limited English children or English proficient children with disabilities, thinking about developing IEPs and carrying them out, conducting effective IEP meetings. Are you all tired yet? The needs of students with significant health, mobility, and behavioral needs, IFSP meetings, thinking the whole pipeline of personnel and incentives to come into the profession. Excuse me. We have a competitive preference priority right now focused on early childhood, comprehensive systems of personnel development. Those activities were always possible with the SPDIG. It just happens that there are points associated with it in the last couple of notices we've released. These are the more systemic activities. And so licensure and certification, working on those with SPDIG funds, bringing people together, alternate routes, reforming teacher certification, teacher advancement initiatives, assisting LEAs in schools with their recruitment and retention, and assisting LEAs to develop and deliver their own professional development. So were there any surprises on this list? Anything you didn't know the SPDIG could do? All right, I would like to surprise someone, but at the same time, it's really nice if you all knew everything that the SPDIG could do. So you may be asking, that's great, you can use all these funds, but will the SPDIG have a real impact? And of course, we have two speakers today who are going to talk about that impact, but I did also want to give you a historical view of what we have seen states accomplish. We've seen, and these are all, if I give you an outcome, it means it's a significant one. You'll have to trust me on that because I don't have the numbers. Improved adolescent reading, improved early literacy, improved early math. The IRIS Center, that's more of a resource, but the whole IRIS Center was developed using SPDIG funds originally. Universities preparing teachers with the skills to teach reading and math and monitor student progress. We've seen achievement gaps between students with disabilities and students without decreased by more than 40%. We've seen many states significantly decrease office discipline referrals. We've seen significant improvement in graduation rates. You're going to hear about that from Minnesota as well today. We see students prepared for college and career after high school, and we see higher rates of retention of special education teachers. And that's Kansas, by the way, at least one of the states. You are required as a SPDIG to contract with your state's PTI, Parent Training and Information Center, or Community Parent Resource Center, if you have one, at least one LEA and at least one IHE university. You have to spend at least 90% on professional development. You have to report fidelity of intervention data, child outcome data. There's some other requirements, but these are the biggies. So any questions for me about the requirements or the menu of things you can choose from in the SPDIG? All right, I'll still be here, but I want to turn things over to Tom Delaney, who is, both of these presenters could talk for a very long time about what their states have done and what they've accomplished. We give them very short time. So please do use the chat if you have questions for them. And I will go ahead and turn it over to Tom.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Hello, everyone. My name is Tom Delaney. I work in the Special Education Division at the Minnesota Department of Education. And I'm really appreciative of the opportunity to spend some time with you today to talk to you about Minnesota State Personnel Development Grant work. In the state of Minnesota, probably like your state, we have a renewed and reinvigorated focus on ensuring equity at all points within our education system, including the special education system. And this is from the state agency level down to the local education agency level, down to classroom practice and student support services. This slide is a list of our 10 commitments to equity in the state of Minnesota. Number one is prioritize equity, and the rest flow from that. Today's activity is my opportunity to follow through on our agency's commitment to equity and share with you the work we're doing on it. Next slide, please. So we'll just wait a second for the slide to advance. In the state of Minnesota, our state systemic improvement plan and state improvement measurable result focus on closing the graduation gap for American Indian and Black students with disabilities. Since our 2015 through 2020 State Personnel Development Grant, we have focused on closing that gap in different ways. And our current State Personnel Development Grant provides the funding mechanism to support the OSEP and SIMMER activities that will make a difference in closing that gap. For the SIMMER, we use a 6-year graduation rate. For the SPDG, we use as an opportunity to focus on a 4-year graduation rate. And we focused on a 4-year with the belief that if we can improve things for the 4-year graduation rate, of course, there would be a statistical cascading effect to the 6-year graduation rate. Next slide, please. Very quickly, the Federal Office of Special Education Programs, through the Fast Facts program, has provided all of our states with very useful information in a user-friendly way that can be used with diverse audiences. Recently, OSEP did share facts around the graduation rates for American Indian or Alaska Native students with disabilities. And we see the national rate at around 76%, but we also see a significant dropout rate. Next slide, please. Also, our partners in the Institute for Education Sciences and National Center for Education Statistics not recently, but in our SPDG journey, also shared graduation rates that give us a glimpse of what we're looking at the national level. And again, we see for Black students with disabilities, 80%, 74% for American Indian Alaska Natives. Next slide, please. In the state of Minnesota, we have a very significant gap. Our American Indian students with disabilities, which the group that's the focus of our current SPDG, graduates at a rate much less than the national rate, as you can see in this data here. For all Minnesota students, we are up at more like an 85%, 86% graduation rate. But for American Indian students with disabilities, and using the federal definition of that term, our rates are down around the 50%. Next slide, please. So in Minnesota, we use our State Personnel Development Grant to focus on one big goal with other related parts to it. And this is our most recent State Personnel Development Grant. As I stated, what we're doing is improving the 4-year graduation rates for American Indian students with disabilities. And we're accomplishing that, or working to accomplish that, by continuing support to previous school State Personnel Development Grant subgrantees, focusing on that rate, and also supporting effective evidence-based practices in new cohorts of schools, increasing the number of retained American Indian special education teachers, and increasing local level engagement of the families of American Indian students with disabilities. Next slide, please. In Minnesota, we have 11 federally recognized Native communities. And in our approach, we want to focus on the school systems that are serving the students that come from those communities. Our initial approach to this in the 2015-2020 State Personnel Development Grant focused on metro areas. But when we determined statistically and mathematically that there are more students in outstate Minnesota, our SPDG focus moved to those school systems in outstate Minnesota. Next slide, please. So we have several cohorts of schools that are working this initiative. As I said, our first cohort in green focused on metro areas, and then we switched our focus to those outstate schools serving tribal communities. And those are the ones you see in light blue and orange, our second and third cohorts. Next slide. Here's just a listing of the school systems that we are currently working with in this SPDG in cohort 2 and 3, and the communities that they serve across the state, both graphically, and I have it in a list there. We're using a classic approach from CSEP and NERN, where we are looking to install a usable innovation at the local level in an enabling context, using effective implementation to achieve improved graduation rates. Something to highlight here is that we have two things that we're taking a look at there and measuring. One is the capacity to do evidence-based practices, and the second is implementing a practice with fidelity so it produces outcomes. This slide sort of summarizes that. In our effort, we use metrics to drive our operations that include effort, which includes a measurement of scale, fidelity, increased capacity to implement those practices from the state agency level to the local agency level, and outcomes. All of this goes into our decision to support data system that we develop as part of the SPDG work. Next slide. We make sure the information flows from team to team. I keep saying from the state agency down to the local level, which means the school building, even into the classroom as we work these initiatives at the local level where the students are at around the state. Next slide, please. I talk about the multiple level approach, and this is just one way of illustrating it as we work from the state agency down to identifying the school system where the students are located literally for closing the graduation gap, installing those practices at the local level so that those results cascade back up to our state level statistics. And I acknowledge, I think I have 1 minute left. Specific activities we're working on. We are increasing the number of retained special education teachers who self-identify as Native American because we know that students learn well when they have someone who looks like them teaching them. And because of the research that demonstrates biculturalism is so powerful for Native students, including Native students with disabilities. Our next slide, I think, is our SPDG Goal 3, which is working with our Parent Training and Information Center, PACER, to improve engagement of families of Native students with disabilities from the state agency level down again to the school building level and classroom level. They're great partners. How's it working? It's working well. We are, in fact, closing the graduation gap. We had a dip a few years ago. And most recently, even through the pandemic, our rates were improving, and we attribute that to two things. One is improvements in state agency and local education agency capacity to implement the practices that make a difference, as well as those practice level measures of scale of implementation and fidelity of implementation to produce improved student outcomes. Next slide. I want to thank you at this time. I'll say thank you, Miigwech, which is our Anishinaabe term in Minnesota for saying thank you, or Pidamia, which is our Dakota phrase that we have in Minnesota as well from our communities. Again, it's an honor to present this information to you. Please contact me if I can share any additional information.
Thank you so much, Tom. It was great to hear. I mean, I'm the project officer. I've heard it a lot, and I never get tired of it, especially seeing those outcomes. Stacy we did get a question earlier that I want to answer now. The question was, are Part B programs required to work with Part C programs for the SPDIG? And it is a more complicated answer. There is a section that talks about determining your state's needs, thinking about working, leveraging, aligning. It's very complicated. And so in that, you are required to work with Part C to consider all the state needs and what's happening. You are not required to do activities specifically with Part C programs. There was a competitive preference priority. It's definitely part of the work. There is no SPDIG for Part C per se, so please do consider that. But it's not a required, it was a competitive preference priority for the CSPD work. I hope that helps. All right, I would like to introduce Carrie Haig to join us. We just had a fun conversation earlier where we determined how many years of SPDIG leadership we had amongst us. I have been with the SPDIG since 2006 or 7, and I had one when I was in a state, and I believe Carrie has been there for even longer, and she has done a fantastic job. So Carrie is going to be sharing some of that wisdom she's gained over time. And show us what their state has accomplished. Carrie, do you want me to start with the sustained initiatives or the TASN?
Start with the TASN slide.
Okay.
Great. So thank you, Jennifer. So I'm an assistant director on the Special Education Title Services team here in Kansas, and I have had the pleasure of being the SPDIG project director for a number of years. It's one of multiple duties that I'm assigned. So we have set this up so that we're able to accomplish many things. And I'm excited to be able to share a bit about how we have utilized the State Personnel Development Grant Program as a proving ground in many respects, how we've had different iterations of that over time, the impact of it, and I want to share with you the difference that having the system has made. And what you're looking at right now is how the work of our state personnel development grant gets deployed. So the bars across the bottom, if you can make that a little bigger, the bars across the bottom are the names of our priorities that we have. And of those bars, I think there's like 8 or 9 of them are specific. Oh, I see what you're doing. Okay, I get it. Are specific for coming out of the State Personnel Development Grant Program. And so after I started in this work, and I started understanding what it takes for teachers to be able to really implement and sustain the change, and then what it takes for a system of support to provide and so the professional development it takes, I realized the gift and the package that the State Personnel Development Program really is. And what it has done for us is provided us the infrastructure and that guides us to implement evidence-based professional development. Because it's, we can't expect teachers or any professionals to implement evidence-based practices and programs independently. And as we want them to improve their skills, they also need support. And what does that support look like? Well, we know it, everyone talks about professional development, it's training, it's coaching, but there's how you go about that makes all the difference in the world. And doing that in an evidence-based professional manner is what the State Personnel Development Grant guides you towards. So essentially, it has provided us the really a structure as well as not only for us to know how our state training capacity has increased, but it's helped us learn how to measure the effectiveness of our system. It's helped us increase the rigor of whatever state level training we do, and the rigor of the trainers and our or implementation coaches. And for us, really, that at the end of this, where we're at now, is that we really are able to measure the effectiveness of any of the training that you see in front of you, whether it be a state trainer, a coach, or a resource. And then we also have data that will come back to us that we can use to make refinements. And that's based upon the needs of the participants, as well as the needs of the trainers that are providing the coaching. And that has been very powerful because I have this little mantra about it's not what you know, it's what you do with what you know. And in Tom's part of the presentation, he referred to those components of implementation science. That's the do part. And that's how you know if you're effective. And so we've combined this into a system so that everyone shares those tenets around evaluation and principles about how we operate and go about implementing this work. And so we can move to the next slide now of what we've done over the course of time. It's looked different depending on the need, the primary need that we had at that stage. Some of the beginning impacts were we had a brand new, where it says new is where the SPDIG specifically started something that helped us start something that did not exist before. So from the ground up. So we had the SPDIG was key in helping us develop the teaching standards around our early childhood unified license And in doing that, we had a collaborative of education faculty and early childhood providers who worked together. And so once that was developed and launched and the license was issued and the programs were adopted, that has gone on, and that actual collaborative of faculty still exists now. They just operate on their own. And that was when we started our first delve into the family partnerships with our Parent Training Information Center. And we're looking at aligning our statewide PD. So another major development was when we utilized the SPDIG support to integrate the social and behavioral competencies and practices with reading and math instruction in our system of Kansas MTSS and alignment, and building that entire curriculum, as well as development of the state training cadre, and then also embedding and threading throughout that family engagement strategies throughout of that. Then the next system that we put into place was around using co-teaching to install evidence-based instructional practices in inclusive settings. So we have a state cadre of state trainers. We have regional trainers. It's a recognized system. We have over 3,000 educators that have engaged in this professional development. It's also aligned within our Kansas MTSS process, and many of so that's a feeder mechanism for that. And then Jennifer referred to this earlier about the mentoring for early career special educators, where we had a real need. We're a really rural state. So we developed a system that's a virtual system where people participate in that. And we have a set of mentors who mentor the mentees. And then what has been a result of that is that's been one of those times where we've been challenged as to, do they have to attend all of these things? What's the percentage? And do we have to do it this way? Why can't they just drop out halfway? And so this was an example of what we found is that when we really stuck to the guns of the participation, that was when we saw that those teachers that went through that program, the retention rate of those folks is anywhere from 85 to 95% that they stay in education and special education. And that's been and then we also have a program where we support teachers of the students of visually impaired and teachers of the deaf and comms, and that's tied in with the e-mentoring as well. And then our latest groundbreaking work for us for Kansas is developing a system of school mental health, professional development, and coaching, where we now have a cadre of state trainers who specifically have worked with district building community leadership teams, and they help them operationalize the protocol that they need to develop successful inclusive instructional programming. And this is done in conjunction with community mental health. We also, it's also done within Kansas MTSS and alignment. We also have virtual now resources that anyone can access. So there's a link there for the briefs where you can find out more information about each of those. But I just wanted you to see how it can be diversified, but yet what keeps everything together is really the main tenets of the entire program. And I really don't refer to it as a grant, but it's a real program that supports your work.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the cool takeaways, and you'll see the link in the chat to the evaluation briefs, which I love, those infographics evaluation briefs. But one of the cool things they were able to do in Kansas is say any professional development provider who wants to work in the state of Kansas, you got to show that it's not just one and done training. You need to have coaching, you need to be prepared to evaluate fidelity, you need to look at the outcomes. So that has been an awesome part of that. Thank you so much, Carrie, for sharing all of those years of work that have really been additive and value added at that. All right, so now we get to have you talk. If you've been waiting to talk all day, or maybe just waiting to talk with people who do work like you, this is your chance. We're asking folks only if you are at a state or lead agency or a TA center that works with SPDIG. So either you're at a state or lead agency, or you're a partner who might work with the SPDIG. This is specifically for those who could apply or help implement the work. So, you know, if you do something in the SCA, but it's not ever going to be related to the SPDIG work, that's fine. You don't need to join this. But for folks who may be involved in SPDIG work someday or are currently, please do join this. So these facilitated breakouts, each room is going to have one facilitator. You're going to be choosing the room that you want based on if you want to be with small population states that currently have a SPDIG to have that conversation, medium population states that currently have a SPDIG, or large population states with a SPDIG. Or if you want to just join Part C leaders and partners who want to talk, not necessarily whether you have a SPDIG or not, or Part B leaders and partners who want to talk whether or not you have a SPDIG, or if you're an other, which I will actually be facilitating. All right, so questions to consider in your room. What are the challenges and what are the facilitators? So what are the challenges and what helps you in applying for a SPDIG? And what are the challenges and facilitators for implementing? So applying for a SPDIG, implementing a SPDIG, what helps and what hurts? You're going to have a chance to share one thought related to one of these questions. You can choose whatever you want of those questions. One thought in 1 minute, or you can say pass, and we'll go around. And then the next round, you can reflect on something you heard or add another thought for 1 minute each, and we'll see how far we go. So we are going to go ahead and choose breakout rooms now. So Shoshana will give you that option. All right, welcome back, everyone. Thank you so much to the facilitators who did a fantastic job. I can actually hear Marion next to me, and I know how well the conversation went. So thank you, facilitators. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. I learned something definitely from listening in. One piece of advice I have, always contact the person on the notice. So when the next competition occurs, there's going to be a person there. It's been me for a very long time. Just in case it's not me, whoever's on the notice, contact them, have a conversation, talk about what you're interested in doing, get in depth. We're allowed to talk about the requirements. And if you have a question that I wasn't planning on talking about in an informational webinar, I will do something else to make sure that the public is aware of it as well. So please do have a conversation with me. We want to grow the best applications possible. We want to fund you. And also, if you are an applicant who's not successful, I always reach out to the applicants who are not successful to say that I'll have a conversation with them. Whether or not they make use of that differs from state to state, but I will always talk about an unsuccessful application and how you can improve it, respond to the peer reviewers' comments for the next time around. If you are thinking about applying, we are not sure that we will have a fiscal year 2024 competition. We are not currently planning on it, but that could change. But if you're thinking about applying in fiscal year 2025, you might be thinking about the PTI, the Parent Training Information Center, the LEA you're going to work with, the university you're going to work with, other partners you might have. Start thinking about it. Again, the notice really doesn't change. So you could read through the last notice. If you email me and you don't have it, I'll just send it to you and start thinking about the needs in your state, doing a really in-depth needs assessment, thinking about all those other partners in the state, VR, we talked about early childhood, et cetera. What are those needs? How can you fill them? Think about what Kansas and Minnesota has done. think about all those activities on the menu and what you might be able to do. We do have a series of webinars that we recorded a few years back with NASD. I think they are all still valid, but if there's something you don't see that you have questions about, let me know. This is a clickable link, and you are going to have these resources available to you because I sent them to Shoshana. Again, you can always email me and I'll send this. And this is also, there's a video about some lessons learned from a SPDIG project that I thought was just especially great and useful. SIG Network is publicly available, so you can always go there. I really appreciate your time today. Thank you again to the facilitators. Thank you to Tom and to Carrie for sharing your wisdom gained over hard work and years. And thank you to the facilitators for having engaging in some great conversations. I hope you all have a good afternoon and a long weekend eventually. All right, take care, everyone.